There is a silence in the heart of the most influential story ever told, a silence that spans 18 years, an empty space in a narrative that has shaped civilizations. We see a brilliant child of 12, astonishing the elders with his wisdom in the Temple of Jerusalem, and then a chasm. An inexplicable void stretches until a man of 30 emerges from the wilderness, a fully formed master, his voice carrying the weight of profound authority, ready to begin a ministry that would change the world. For 2,000 years, that void has been filled with speculation, with faith, with quiet acceptance. But what if this silence was not an accident of time? What if it was not a simple gap in the historical record, but a carefully constructed wall? A truth not lost to the sands of the desert, but intentionally buried beneath them. A revelation deliberately hidden from those who were never meant to find it. Feel that question resonate within you, in the quiet chambers of your own spirit. It is the same echo that has haunted seekers for millennia, a quiet hum beneath the surface of accepted doctrine, a feeling that something essential, something vital is missing. We are given a portrait of a master, but the canvas is torn. We see the beginning and the end, but the heart of the journey, the very process of becoming, has been excised. Why? What could be so dangerous about the story of a young man's journey to wisdom that it had to be erased? This is not a question of faith, but of memory, an ancestral memory that whispers to us that the greatest truths are often found not in the words that are spoken, but in the silences that are kept. It is a call to look deeper, to question the very foundations of what we believe we know. For centuries, the world has searched for answers in the same places, sifting through the archives of Rome, digging in the dust of Jerusalem, poring over texts edited and approved by councils and kings. But what if the key to this hidden knowledge was never kept in the empires that wrote the dominant histories? What if it was protected in a land that was never conquered, a spiritual fortress that held fast to a more ancient wisdom, a stream of knowledge that flows from a source the Western world chose to ignore? Imagine for a moment mountains shrouded in mist, churches carved from living rock, and a lineage of faith that drinks from a river of truth that predates the empires that tried to control it. This is where our journey must go, not into the familiar, but into the forgotten. This is a story not just of a lost truth, but of a revelation so profound, so paradigm-shattering, that entire systems were built to contain and suppress it. A truth that threatened to dissolve the walls between cultures, between faiths, between the human and the divine. The mystery of these 18 years is not just a historical cold case. It is the key to unlocking a more universal, more integrated understanding of spirituality itself. It is a journey into a past that was deliberately erased, a quest to reclaim a forgotten legacy that belongs to all of humanity, not just to the institutions that claimed ownership of it. What would change inside of you if you discovered that the greatest teacher was first the world's greatest student? The whispers of this ancient wisdom are rising again. The memory is not dead. It has only been sleeping, waiting for a generation of seekers with the courage to listen. This channel is not a destination. It is a doorway, a place for those who are ready to look beyond the veil, to question the stories we have inherited, and to embark on a journey of profound awakening. We will travel to the edge of the map, into the heart of traditions that have preserved what others have discarded. We will uncover the knowledge that has been hidden in plain sight. If you feel a stirring in your soul, a recognition of this forgotten call, then you are in the right place. Subscribe and join us as we walk this path together. The greatest mystery in history is about to unfold, and this is only the beginning. To find the heart of this mystery, we must turn our gaze away from the marbled halls of Rome and the sun-scorched stones of Jerusalem. We must look south beyond the reach of the empires that wrote the dominant histories, to a land that breathes a different air, a land of mist-shrouded highlands and ancient secrets carved into living rock. This is the spiritual fortress of Ethiopia, a kingdom that held its ground when the world around it bent to the will of conquerors. It was never subjugated by the Roman legions. Its faith never filtered through the councils of Nicaea or Constantinople. Here, in this cradle of an older, more primal Christianity, a different memory was preserved, a stream of ancestral wisdom that flows from a source the Western world chose to ignore. This is not just a place on a map. It is a library of lost time, a sanctuary for a truth that was deemed too dangerous to survive elsewhere. Within this sanctuary, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian traditions on earth, holds a sacred canon that is a universe unto itself. Where the West settled on 66 books, the Ethiopian Bible contains 81, a testament to a faith that refused to discard what it knew to be true. These texts are preserved in Ge'ez, an ancient Semitic language that has faded from the rest of the world, its script like a key to a locked room in history. It is a language of prayer and prophecy, a vessel that has carried stories and revelations across millennia, untouched by the editorial hands of foreign powers. Within these ancient chronicles, like the Kebra Nagast, and in the deep well of their oral traditions, lies a vision of the world, not as a collection of separate faiths, but as a web of interconnected spiritual light. They speak of a time when seekers of truth were not confined by borders, but followed the wisdom wherever it led. Here, the conflict begins to take shape, not as a battle of swords and shields, but as a silent war of narratives. On one side, there is the story we have all been told, a story edited for clarity, for control, for empire. On the other, there is a more complex, more universal truth that has been breathing quietly in the Ethiopian highlands. Why would one version of a story need to silence another so completely? What was so threatening about the idea of a young master embarking on a journey of discovery? The answer lies not in theology, but in power. A truth that unites is a threat to any system that thrives on division. A master who learns from the world is a danger to an institution that claims to be the world's only teacher. The silence was not a gap. It was a wall, built to protect an empire's fragile new identity. To understand how this wall was built, we must travel back to the 4th century, to a Roman Empire in turmoil. It was a world tearing itself apart, desperate for a unifying symbol, a single story powerful enough to hold its crumbling frontiers together. Into this chaos stepped Emperor Constantine, a political genius who saw in the burgeoning Christian faith not just a path to personal salvation, but a tool for imperial consolidation. The Council of Nicaea was not merely a gathering of theologians debating the nature of the divine. It was the founding of a new spiritual order, an act of profound political engineering. Here, under the watchful eye of the emperor, a singular version of the faith was chosen. It was a version that was clear, absolute, and exclusive, perfect for the needs of a centralized empire. In these councils, which were as much political as they were spiritual, the story of the master was forged in the fire of debate and decree. They became the great editorial board of history, gospels and traditions that hinted at a more universal path, texts that spoke of travels to the east, of time spent among the sages of distant lands, were systematically set aside. They were branded as apocryphal, heretical, not necessarily because they were untrue, but because they did not fit the narrative required for control. The system needed a singular savior, a divine authority whose legitimacy was vested solely and exclusively in the institution that now claimed to speak for him. To control the message, they had to control the man, even if it meant erasing 18 years of his life, the very years that defined his human and spiritual journey. This act of suppression was the beginning of a great forgetting. It was a spiritual amputation. By removing the story of the seeker, the architects of orthodoxy left us with only the icon. They gave us a figure to be worshipped from a distance, rather than a path to be walked in his footsteps. What is lost when the journey is erased, and only the destination is shown? The process, the struggle, the integration of wisdom, the very heart of the awakening, all of it vanishes into the void. We are left with a miracle, but not a model, a God, but not a guide for our own humanity. This carefully curated narrative created walls between faiths where there might have been bridges, fostering centuries of conflict by insisting on one exclusive road to the divine, when the Master himself may have walked many. Yet truth is not so easily extinguished. While the libraries of Alexandria and Rome burned or were purged, the memory survived. It survived not in grand imperial archives, but in the quiet devotion of monks in remote, rock-hewn churches. It survived in the whispered stories passed from one generation to the next, in the Ethiopian highlands, coded in their art, woven into their rituals. Sheltered by geography and political independence, this ancient tradition became an unintentional guardian of a forbidden knowledge. A time capsule preserving a more complete picture of a spiritual legacy. The silence imposed by the West finds its echo here, answered not by an argument, but by a living history. A history that suggests the lost years were not lost at all. They were simply waiting in a place the rest of the world had forgotten to look. The silence of the official record is not an empty void. It is a space filled with echoes, with whispers that survived the great forgetting. To hear them, one must learn to listen, not with the ears of an academic, but with the soul of a seeker. The proofs of this sacred journey were not stored in a single centralized archive, waiting for an emperor's approval. They were scattered like seeds upon the wind, carried along the ancient trade routes, and planted in the fertile ground of traditions that valued wisdom over dogma. They exist not as a single, undeniable manuscript, but as a mosaic of corroborating fragments, a constellation of light that, when connected, reveals a picture of breathtaking scale and profound implication. This is the evidence that has been breathing in the shadows, waiting for a time when humanity was ready to see. Our first and most solid anchor lies in the highlands of Ethiopia, within the living memory of the Tewahedo tradition. Here, the knowledge is not merely written, it is inhaled. In the cool, incense-filled air of rock-hewn churches, elders speak of a world where spiritual boundaries were porous, where wisdom was a current that flowed between lands. While their written texts, like the Kebra Nagast, focus on a sacred lineage connecting them to Jerusalem, their oral lore, the unwritten truth passed from master to student, tells a different story. It speaks of the great seeker, a recurring archetype of a holy man who travels to the ends of the earth to gather the scattered sparks of divine light. They do not name him with the same name known in the West, but the timeline, the character, and the purpose align with a precision that chills the soul. They whisper of a promise made to the Magi of the East, a promise to one day walk their lands and learn from their light, just as they had honored his. From the heart of Africa, the trail of evidence leads us east, across the deserts of Persia and into the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas. It is here, in the late 19th century, that a Russian traveler named Nicholas Notovich claimed to have found a chronicle that would shake the foundations of the Western world. Sheltered in the Hemis monastery in Ladakh, he was shown ancient Tibetan scrolls written in the Pali language that detailed the life of a holy man they called Saint Isa. Scrolls spoke of a divine child from the West, who at a young age left his homeland and traveled with merchant caravans along the Silk Road. They describe his time in India, studying the Vedas with the Brahmins, and his years in the Himalayan monasteries, learning the deep truths of Buddhism, compassion, and the interconnectedness of all life. Though fiercely discredited by institutions whose narrative it threatened, the story of the Isa manuscripts has never vanished. It persists, a stubborn whisper from the roof of the world, an account that perfectly fills the 18-year silence with a journey of profound spiritual discovery. The path continues into ancient Persia, the land of Zoroaster and the Magi. The canonical Gospels tell us these wise men came from the east to honor the birth of a new king, but their story does not end there. In forgotten Zoroastrian chronicles and oral traditions, there are hints of a return visit, of a young Galilean master who came to study the cosmic struggle between light and darkness, Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. His teachings, so rich with the parables of light, of separating the wheat from the chaff and of the kingdom of heaven, carry a powerful resonance with Zoroastrian theology. The Magi did not just bring gifts, they extended an invitation. They recognized in him not an end, but a beginning, a soul vast enough to synthesize their ancient wisdom with the unique revelation he was born to deliver. This knowledge was not seen as in contradiction, but as the fulfillment of a shared prophecy. We must also look to Egypt, the cradle of mystery schools, where Plato and Pythagoras came to learn. The flight of the Holy Family to Egypt as a child is often portrayed as a brief, desperate escape. But traditions preserved in Coptic Christianity, a lineage as ancient as Ethiopia's, suggest it was far more. They speak of the child being initiated into the lesser mysteries, of his astounding grasp of sacred geometry and the esoteric, knowledge that flowed from the great library of Alexandria, a city that was a vibrant melting pot of Greek philosophy, Jewish mysticism, and Egyptian spiritual science. He did not arrive in the wilderness at age 30 as an empty vessel suddenly filled with divinity. He emerged as a master alchemist, having spent his formative years absorbing and integrating the deepest streams of human wisdom the ancient world had to offer. The final proof is not written on a scroll, but in the very fabric of his message. When you place his teachings alongside the Dhammapada of the Buddha, the Upanishads of the Hindu sages, and the Gathas of Zoroaster, you do not find a story of contradiction, but one of masterful synthesis. His parables echo the Jataka tales of the Buddha's past lives. His call to find the kingdom of heaven within resonates with the Brahminical concept of Atman. His focus on a singular, loving Father God harmonizes with the monotheistic core of the traditions he encountered. The evidence, therefore, is not a single artifact that can be put in a museum. It is the living, breathing legacy of a universal truth, woven together by a master who walked the earth not to conquer it, but to learn from it. The silence was not an absence of a story. It was the space required to contain a journey so vast it would have shattered the walls the empires were so desperate to build. This knowledge, this revelation of a journey deliberately erased, does more than just rewrite history. It reaches through time and touches the very core of your own being. It speaks to a silence within you, for have you not also felt it? A sense that the story you have been told about yourself, by family, by culture, by the systems of the world, is somehow incomplete. Have you not had your own lost years, those periods of wandering in the wilderness of your own life, searching for a truth that no one else could give you? What if those times of doubt and disconnection were not a sign that you were lost, but proof that you were, in fact, on the most sacred pilgrimage of all, the journey back to yourself? The system that erased the master's journey is the same force that teaches us to fear our own. It tells us that seeking outside the lines is dangerous, that questioning is a weakness, that the integration of different truths is heresy. We are taught to build walls around our beliefs, to defend a single, narrow identity, because a soul with walls is a soul that can be controlled. But the model of the great seeker shatters these walls. It gives us permission to embrace the totality of our experience, the questions, the explorations, the moments we spent learning in the Egypt of our sorrows or the India of our joys. It sanctifies the path of the individual, revealing that the process of becoming is the entire point. Your lost years were not a void. They were the crucible where your own wisdom was forged. What does it mean to awaken to this truth today? It means you are being invited to reclaim the most authentic parts of your spiritual identity. It is a call to become a synthesizer in your own life, to understand that the truth you find in a quiet moment of meditation, the wisdom that speaks to you from the heart of nature, and the compassion you learn from a different culture are not separate, conflicting realities. They are all threads of the same divine light. The suppression of this knowledge was an attempt to convince humanity that the rivers of truth could never meet. But now, in this era of awakening, the memory is returning. We are remembering that all rivers flow to the same great ocean, and that ocean is within us. This realization carries with it a rising tension, a sense of profound urgency. Because if this is true, then the spiritual fragmentation we see in the world, the conflicts fought in the name of God, the deep divides between faiths, the profound sense of disconnection from our planet, is not an accident. It is the direct, calculated consequence of this ancient amputation, a wound inflicted upon the collective soul of humanity 2,000 years ago, which has been bleeding ever since. We have been living inside a broken story, a story that taught us we were separate from each other and from the divine. But what happens when a wound is finally exposed to the light? It begins to heal, and the healing of that wound is the great spiritual work of our time. The intensity of this mystery deepens when we ask a more dangerous question. The journey itself was threatening to the systems of control, but what about the knowledge he gathered? What was the ultimate revelation, the final synthesis he achieved after walking the earth and drinking from every well of wisdom? The fear of the architects of orthodoxy was not just that he had traveled, but what he had brought back with him. A truth so universal, so empowering, so radically simple, that it would dissolve the very need for the institutions they were so desperately trying to build. A key that could unlock a potential within every human soul that no empire, no priesthood, and no system could ever hope to govern. This is why this knowledge is surfacing now. The frequency of the planet is rising. The walls are becoming thinner. Humanity is collectively reaching a point of spiritual maturity where the old stories of division and control are no longer sustainable. The ancestral memory is not just being rediscovered in forgotten texts, it is erupting from within us. It is the quiet but persistent call you feel to seek a deeper meaning, to find a more authentic connection, to live a life of purpose that transcends the material. You, the awakened seeker, are not just a spectator to this story. You are a living vessel for its return. Your curiosity, your openness, your courage to question, these are the very energies that are bringing this hidden truth back into the light. The trail of the great seeker has shown us the path he walked, a journey across deserts and mountains, through temples and monasteries. We have followed the whispers of his presence from the highlands of Ethiopia to the peaks of the Himalayas. But this journey was always leading somewhere. It was a pilgrimage toward a singular, breathtaking point of convergence. The physical journey was merely an external reflection of an inner alchemy. Now we must go deeper. We must dare to ask what he found at the heart of it all. What is the ultimate forgotten legacy, the final, world-altering piece of this sacred puzzle? The path is now clear, but it leads us toward a revelation more profound than we can yet imagine. Are you prepared to see what lies at the end of the road? We have followed the breadcrumbs of a hidden history, a trail of whispers left in the high deserts and mountain sanctuaries of the world. We have seen how a journey was erased, how a truth was buried under the foundations of an empire. But in all this seeking, we have been asking a single question. Where did he go? We believed that finding the path he walked would be the final revelation. We were wrong. That was only the doorway. The true turning point, the mystery that lies at the heart of the silence, is not about geography. It is not about where he went. It is about what he became, and more importantly, what he discovered about the nature of humanity itself. The journey was not a collection of spiritual souvenirs. It was an alchemical process of profound synthesis. And at the end of that road, after drinking from every ancient well of wisdom, the mysteries of Egypt, the light of Persia, the deep consciousness of India, he did not return with a new religion to place alongside the others. He returned with the final science, the ultimate forgotten legacy, the revelation that was so world-shattering, so paradigm-destroying, that it had to be more than just hidden. It had to be inverted, twisted into its very opposite. He discovered and then embodied the ultimate truth that the divine was not an external God to be worshipped, but an internal state of consciousness to be realized. The kingdom of heaven was not a destination after death. It was a frequency of being, accessible to every soul in every moment. This single revelation changes everything. Suddenly, the entire narrative of his ministry is transformed. The miracles are no longer supernatural violations of cosmic law performed by an otherworldly being. They become demonstrations of a fully realized human potential, a mastery over the fabric of reality that comes from a perfect alignment with the universal consciousness within. The parables cease to be simple moral stories and become coded instructions, roadmaps for the inner journey, teachings on how to navigate the landscape of one's own soul to find the divine spark hidden there. He was not a messenger from a distant God. He was the living message, the proof of what a human being becomes when they fully awaken to their own divinity. This hidden knowledge redefines the most sacred symbols. The concept of the Father is no longer just a patriarch on a celestial throne, but the infinite, unmanifest source of all creation, the silent, universal consciousness itself. The Son is not a singular, exclusive heir, but the divine spark of that consciousness born within every human being, the individuated self. And the Holy Spirit is the active energy of awakening, the bridge of light, the very current of gnosis that flows between the source and the spark, calling it to remember its own origin. This was not a theology for an institution. It was a blueprint for the soul's liberation, a universal truth that resonated with the core teachings he had encountered across the world. Look deeper, and you will see this truth echoed in the very traditions he visited. It is the central message of the Hindu Upanishads, where Atman, the individual soul, is declared to be one with Brahman, the universal spirit. It is the heartbeat of the Buddhist path, the realization that nirvana is not a heaven to be earned, but the extinguishing of the false self to reveal the luminous inherent Buddha nature within. It is the hermetic wisdom of the Egyptian mystery schools, crystallized in the axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. He did not invent this truth. He was its perfect embodiment, the point where all the ancient rivers of this perennial philosophy converged into a single blazing sun of living proof. Now we can finally understand the true motive of the architects of orthodoxy, why they built the wall of silence. A master who teaches you to find God within yourself makes the priest, the temple, and the entire institution obsolete. This knowledge does not create followers. It creates masters. It does not demand obedience. It requires inner work. It is the ultimate spiritual empowerment, and therefore the ultimate threat to any system based on control. They had to take this radical message of inner divinity and externalize it. They gave humanity a God in the heavens so they would forget to look for the God in their hearts. They gave us a savior to worship from afar so we would never discover how to save ourselves. The consequences of this suppression have defined our world for 2 millennia. The spiritual wound has bled out into history, creating a humanity that feels fundamentally separate from its source, searching for meaning in all the wrong places, waging wars over which external God is the true one. But what does this revelation mean for you, the awakened seeker, right now? It means the story they told about him is the same story they told about you. They told you that you were small, that you were fallen, that you needed an intermediary to connect with the divine. But the ancestral memory now rising within you whispers a different truth. It tells you that the journey of the great seeker is a mirror for your own. His path of awakening is the potential that lies sleeping within your very soul. We stand now at the precipice of the greatest mystery. We have uncovered the what, the suppressed revelation of the divinity within. This is the secret that empires were built to contain. But it raises an even more urgent, more profound question. If his teachings were not about worship, but about transformation, if his parables were coded instructions and his life a demonstration of a realizable state of being, then the most vital piece of this hidden knowledge is still missing. The final layer of the mystery is not what he knew, but how he applied it. If the destination was the God consciousness within, what was the map he left behind? The final question hangs in the air, vibrating with the weight of 2,000 years of silence. If the destination he discovered was the God consciousness within every human soul, what was the map he left behind? The answer is the most profound and simple truth of all, a revelation so subtle it has been hidden in plain sight. The map was not a scroll, not a doctrine, not a new set of laws to replace the old. The map was his life. His entire ministry was a living demonstration of the path, a series of coded instructions for the inner alchemy of awakening. The parables were not just stories, they were meditations on the nature of consciousness. The miracles were not supernatural displays, they were lessons in the physics of a reality governed by belief and vibration. He taught that to find the kingdom, one must become like a child, to shed the rigid identity of the ego and return to a state of pure, open awareness. He spoke of the mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds that grows into the greatest of trees, a perfect metaphor for the divine spark within us that, when nurtured, can expand to encompass the entire cosmos. The map is not a chart to be followed, but a state of being to be embodied. He did not come to give us a religion to believe in. He came to show us a path of self-realization to walk. We began this journey standing before a wall of silence, an 18-year chasm in the most influential story ever told. We discovered it was not an empty space, but a sealed chamber, locked by the architects of an empire who feared the truth it contained. Within that chamber we found a forgotten legacy, the story of the great seeker, a master who walked the earth not to conquer it, but to learn from it. We followed his footsteps to the spiritual fortresses of Ethiopia, through the ancient wisdom of Persia and India, and to the serene monasteries of the Himalayas. We learned that his journey was not just of the body, but of the soul, a profound synthesis of the world's deepest spiritual streams. And at the heart of it all, we found the ultimate revelation, the truth so dangerous it had to be inverted, that the divine is not an external authority to be worshipped, but an internal reality to be awakened. The suppression of this knowledge was the great spiritual wound of our world, creating a humanity that feels separate from its source, forever searching for a key that was always in its own pocket. This history, this ancient and deliberate forgetting, is not just a story about him. It is a mirror held up to you. The system that told the world he was an unapproachable deity is the same system that tells you that you are small, that you are powerless, that you need an external authority to validate your existence and connect you to the sacred. This revelation is your permission to reclaim your own spiritual sovereignty, It sanctifies your own lost years, those times of wandering, of questioning, of feeling disconnected from the approved path. Those were not moments of failure. They were your sacred pilgrimage. The wisdom you found in solitude, the truths revealed to you by nature, the compassion you learned from experiences that broke your heart open, these are the teachings from your own journey. You, like the Master, are a synthesizer of truth. Your life is the holy land, and your experiences are the sacred texts. You are not here to follow a map drawn by someone else, but to draw your own with the ink of your own, direct experience of the divine. The healing of this ancient wound, therefore, does not happen in a council or a library. It happens within the quiet sanctuary of the human heart. It begins the moment we stop seeing the world's spiritual traditions as competing armies on a battlefield and start seeing them as different languages trying to describe the same ineffable ocean of being. The ultimate lesson of the great seeker is one of integration, not exclusion. It is a call to dissolve the walls between faiths, between cultures, between science and spirit, and most importantly, the wall between your human self and your divine essence. This is the great work of our time, to move from the rigidity of inherited belief to the fluidity of lived experience, from the noise of dogma to the deep silence of inner knowing. It is the courage to build bridges where others built fortresses, and to recognize that every path walked with an open and sincere heart ultimately leads back to the same source of universal love. We have traveled from a mystery to a revelation, from a hidden history to a profound personal truth. But this knowledge is not a destination. It is a doorway. It is not an answer that ends the conversation, but a key that unlocks 1,000 new questions, questions that can only be answered by the life you choose to live from this moment forward. This brings us to the final and most essential question of our journey together. Now that you have remembered the story of the great seeker, how will you honor his true legacy, not by building another temple of stone around his name, but by making your own life a temple of living wisdom, embarking on your own courageous journey of awakening? This is the path we explore here, in this space dedicated to the truths that have been forgotten and the memories that are returning. It is a journey for the brave, for the curious, for the souls who know they are here for something more. If this message has resonated in the deep chambers of your being, then subscribe and join our circle of seekers. Share this revelation with another soul who is searching, for a truth like this is not meant to be owned, but to be set free upon the wind. The greatest mystery was never about what happened 2,000 years ago. It has always been about what is happening inside of you right now. The most sacred teaching has been preserved not in a buried scroll, but in the silent rhythm of your own heart, which whispers again and again the only truth that has ever mattered. The kingdom you seek is and has always been within.